The air campaign supporting Desert Storm is linked to precision. From accurate strikes by stealth and attack aircraft, American and coalition forces fired over 13,000 precision-guided munitions during the conflict.
Impact. Boom! There's a hit.
This produced some spectacular images that to this day continue to influence the way we remember Desert Storm. Even in the run-up of the campaign, the onset of new weapon systems, sensors and GPS had set great expectations on air power. And next to specialized aircraft like the F-117 and the A-10, planners had placed high hopes on one aircraft in particular, the F-16. Air Force planners in the Pentagon and theater had estimated that the F-16 would use Maverick anti-tank missiles or CBU-89s against tanks and other equipment. The planners' mid-November 1990 theater air campaign, for example, had calculated that a 4-ship of F-16s carrying 8 Mavericks or 16 CBU-89s would destroy 3 tanks. Reality turned out very different. Those 13,000 PGMs I spoke about, they only accounted for about 6% of all the munitions used from the air, as 200,000 unguided munitions were dropped on Iraqi positions at the same time. And they were targeting the command structure, the infrastructure, basing, stockpiles and more. In all of that, the F-16 became the unlikely workhorse for the air campaign in a much different way than expected. Here's what happened in a video sponsored by Thrustmaster. For Desert Storm, over 250 F-16s were fielded, the highest number of any aircraft in the coalition's fleet of 1,700 aircraft. Due to both its availability and lower cost, the F-16 would go on to fly the most sorties out of all available aircraft. And that's not just based on pure sortie numbers. With 1.2 sorties per airframe a day, the F-16 was the busiest aircraft of the whole campaign, just after the A-10, and it also has some of the highest tonnage ratios of all aircraft. And on top of that, even though it was part of basically every aspect of the air campaign, the F-16 also had the lowest proportional losses. Another factor influenced the ubiquity of the F-16. Its versatility to be effective in a wide array of mission sets. It could act as an escort, it could deliver ordnance as an attacker, and in a more specialized role, it operated as a SEAD platform. It also conducted scud hunting, and it was also used as a reconnaissance asset. But it was the ability to put bombs on targets that truly shows the importance of the F-16 in the air campaign. With close to 40,000 bombs delivered, the F-16 far outstripped any other fighter in the theater. But it is the fact that basically all of it was unguided that makes it so different. There are 3 reasons why unguided munitions were so predominant in this air campaign. First one is the almighty dollar. PGMs are extremely expensive, to the point where it is often just not economical to use them unless for contextual reasons. The destruction of some units by precision weapons would have required an enormous and costly effort, especially when the same units could be functionally destroyed by dumb bombs. If you look at the following table, you can see the cost argument reflected by pure numbers, with the unit cost of a dumb bomb being far below that of precision-guided munitions. And that brings me to the next point. It is not always appropriate to even use a specific weapon over another, just because it is more advanced or because it is cheaper. You set up your loadout based on the mission requirement. And the F-16 generally did not fly against small, hard targets like tanks. The use of precision-guided munitions can be inappropriate or impossible against some types of targets. The classic example is a large mobile military unit, in which precise location and identification of individual targets is impossible or impractical. It would be possible to cripple an armored unit by destroying each of its vehicles individually with precision-guided munitions. This tactic of attrition by precision munitions would, however, take many sorties, much time, and considerable quantities of relatively expensive precision weapons. As such, the F-16 would fly mainly attacks against area targets. Initial air campaign plans tasked F-16s mostly during the daylight hours in large strike packages against targets such as airfields, chemical weapon storage areas, Scud missile production facilities, Republican Guard locations, leadership targets, and military storage facilities. Several strikes against strategic targets in the Baghdad area occurred during the first 2 weeks of the war. F-16s conducted a proportionally large number of strikes against C-3, NBC, OCA, and oil targets. Much of this tasked the F-16 beyond the forward line of troops, with interdiction and therefore the destruction of the Iraqi's army support structure becoming the main focus. So there are multiple reasons why PGMs were mainly used by other aircraft, but one of the most important factors was also that only a subset of the F-16 air crews actually had any experience in delivering, for example, Maverick missiles. And the same applies to SEAD missions using HARM missiles, which were conducted, when it comes to the F-16 community, only by one squadron which was based out in Turkey. The Maverick has never been the weapon of choice by the F-16 community. Few of its pilots had trained with or used the weapon in peacetime training, while cockpit instrumentation was far from optimal for the utilization of the Maverick. Thus, unguided bombs became the norm for the F-16. They fitted the available operational capabilities of both the plane and aircrews and were available in high numbers. Though it may sound like the F-16 was relegated to a bomb crate by circumstance, this negates the fact that it was accurate enough with unguided munitions and that this capability provided a sweet spot between surgical strikes and the B-52 carpet bombing. The smart plane dumb bomb combo placed the F-16 at the forefront of coalition air power. You just had to find the right targets, and there were plenty of those, and the F-16s would go to work. Aircrews could rely on something called constantly computed impact point to give them a relatively high degree of accuracy. With CCIP, the pilot has a visual indicator for where the bombs will hit that is calculated by the onboard avionics based on spatial and weapon data. This smart system made a dumb bomb far more accurate and thus effective than it would otherwise be. Let's go through an approximate simulation of how that would look like. In the ground attack configuration during Desert Storm, the F-16 was typically set up with 2 AIM-9s for self-defense, 500 rounds of APHE ammunition for the 20mm Vulcan, and then either 4 to 6 Mk-82 500-pound bombs or 2 Mk-84 2,000-pound bombs, or 4 CBUs of different variants. Setting ourselves up with 2 Mk-84s, our F-16 here is going to simulate an attack against a C-3 command, communications and control post, a typical target of the time for the F-16. Now let's get underway, and as I do that, I will go through the main information for our attack. By and large, the F-16s would drop their bombs in the following manner. The F-16s drop primarily general-purpose unguided ordnance by using a 30 to 60 degree high-altitude dive bomb release procedure. These medium-altitude deliveries effectively negated the Iraqi AAA and IR SAM threats. As we are now on the way, let me cruise along on autopilot towards the target. We will try to imitate the set parameters and release above 10,000 feet radar out. With the dive, this meant that weapon release could be at slant ranges of up to 18 to 20,000 feet. You can see another reason here why the F-16 went for small area targets. Individual targets like a tank would be almost impossible to pick up with the naked eye, and radar-assisted deliveries or targeting pods were still rare at the time, although they were used as well. But that is a topic for another video. In the meantime, we have arrived at the target. You can see some air defenses lying around here, so we better stick to the plan and stay out of their threat bubble. Luckily for us, the weather is good and a high to medium alt dive should be just fine. This is a luxury, not every F-16 mission during Desert Storm had such fine weather. So let's go to air to ground mode, and you'll see a vertical line now ending in a circle with a central dot. That's our pipper, basically the bomb will land here symbol, and the CCIP system I told you about. It translates data on speed, heading, wind, weapons ballistics and more into a simple visual indicator for me to use. Our attack itself will otherwise be relatively similar to those of dive bombers during World War II. Okay, master arm is on and we are ready to attack. Let's place our heading indicator ahead of the target and go into a dive. Throttling back here to avoid picking up too much speed, I keep the aircraft aimed beyond the target with the vertical line passing over it. A horizontal line will then move down, and once meeting the pipper will move up. Once the pipper is above the target, it's pickle time, and I release the bomb. Pulling out and throttling up, I fire countermeasures for good measure. I don't want any IR missiles locking onto me. Meanwhile, the bombs find their mark. What looks straightforward in a simulation is of course exceptionally different in real life. But this gives you an overall understanding of how the F-16s were used during Desert Storm. And if you are interested in the equipment I used, look no further than our sponsor Thrustmaster, who just came out with their new Viper throttle quadrant system. This throttle quadrant represents the real-life setup of an F-16, so much so that it is licensed via the United States Air Force. The plug-and-play integration into DCS means that you can skip time setting it all up and immediately go about learning the Viper. Major functionalities are integrated directly here, from the throttle switches for engine control, then your radar, air brake, communication, and then autopilot, radar warning receiver, countermeasures, and landing gear. Thrustmaster's setup here has made it a pleasure to learn the Viper in DCS, so much so that I'm thoroughly hooked on the F-16 module right now. Right now, the Viper TQS is available for pre-order and it will release on October 11th, 2023. Check out the description of the video for more information. With those dark and wet autumn months coming up and Christmas appearing on the horizon, this is the best time to upgrade your flight experience with a nifty setup like this one. The question is now, was this way of delivering ordnance effective? We can say the proof is in the rapid collapse of the Iraqi forces, but there is of course more to it than that. First off, let us look at some of the bomb damage assessment that was conducted by the USAF and official analysts. Specifically here, the ratio of fully successful to not fully successful in terms of missions gives us a solid indication that the F-16 was credited with a positive track record during Desert Storm. Of course, you may remember from other videos I made of Desert Storm that bomb damage assessment during the conflict was difficult and fraught with errors. To this day, we can only have modest confidence in the data, and that always means that it's going to be approximate. The main issue with the F-16 CCIP delivery method, however, was that although it was accurate, it was not the most precise either for several reasons. First, the visual bombing pipper was 2 milliradians wide. At a slant range of 20,000 feet, typical for high-angle dive deliveries, the pipper blanked out an area on the ground 40 feet across, often hiding the target. To the resulting errors must be added bomb dispersion errors. For example, the Mark 84's weapon dispersion was 5 to 6 milliradians. The result of both of these kinds of errors was a worst-case 160-foot miss distance, even if the pilot did everything right and the system worked perfectly. Furthermore, aircraft systems played a key role in weapon delivery accuracy. For example, if the aircraft system altitude had a 200-foot error, the bomb would have hit 120 feet from the intended target, under the same circumstances as described above. It is worth to mention that much of the planning and air power thinking pre-Desert Storm was set around low-altitude bombing. This would have done away with some of the accuracy handicaps, but for the survivability of aircraft, medium and higher altitudes were better, as was also demonstrated during Desert Storm, with the losses occurred by American A-10s and other coalition aircraft. That said, as Desert Storm progressed, damage assessment, target selection, crew experience, and of course also better weapon selection for each target meant that the F-16, as part of a 2 or 4 ship or a larger formation, was effective against smaller area targets. When they were flying these sorties, they were able to take them out with a reasonably high degree of confidence. It wasn't a pure one sortie, one kill scenario, but close enough in most cases. And that helped as part of the air campaign to erode the Iraqi army's command, control, lines of communication, logistics, stockpiles, and ultimately also erode its morale. And as such, a plane that was initially conceived as a pure rock and roll 6-shooter cowboy dogfighter, wow, that plane became one of the most important ground attackers of the whole conflict. Big thank you here to Andrew and all the Patreons and channel members for their support, and also a big thank you for Thrustmaster for sponsoring this video. All important information for the video and also Thrustmaster's throttle quadrant, check out the description below. And as always, have a great day and see you in the sky.